Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Good evening, afternoon, or morning, depending on when you are listening. This is, as noted, Peter Robbins with Meanwhile Here on Earth. And you are listening on KGRA Digital Broadcasting, kgradb.com. You can also be listening on YouTube. This show is carried on Spreaker.com, Spreaker. All of our shows are there, but only in audio. Should you subscribe to KGRA and you use my name, Peter, as your entry code, you will receive a 30% discount. Yes, it's true, 30%. This is our final show of the year, and it is a year since I've been doing this show. It's been a wonderful experience, and I want to start by thanking all of our guests who have been kind enough to give us their time and share their stories with us. Also, my extraordinary producer, Bill Skywatcher, who is listening from his world headquarters in New York State. And without any further ado, let me bring on our guest for the evening. Rich Hoffman is a 25-plus year Army Information Technology defense contractor with Chigach Government Solutions. He is a senior, and I think I just butchered that name. You can correct that when you come on, Rich. He is a senior systems engineer analyst working in the U.S. Army Materiel Command Headquarters at Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama, helping to shape the future directions of systems, networks, and application hosting arrangements used within the Army. For the past 57 years, since his 8th grade science class and timed with the patrolman Lonnie Zamora sighting in Socorro, New Mexico on 24 April 1964, Rich has been pursuing his primary interest in investigating, researching, and lecturing on UFOs. Rich grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and started his investigations into UFOs in 1964. In 1969, he joined the Midwest UFO Network, later known as MUFON. He was also the Director of Investigations for the Ohio UFO Investigations League. Over the many decades with MUFON, he served as State Section Director, State Director, STAR Team member, Deputy Director for Investigations, and then Director, Strategic Projects. He remains a benefactor and lifelong member of MUFON. In June 2017, Rich left his positions in MUFON to start a scientific organization known as the Scientific Coalition for UFO Studies, SCU, which we'll be going into in some depth in the second hour of this show. Currently, he is an executive board member for them. SCU is now composed of 150-plus scientists, engineers, former military, academia, and business professionals who work to solve the phenomena using scientific methodologies and leverage current technologies to investigate them. It is a think tank that focuses on cases that have strong supportive evidence and requires dedicated scientific study. He is also a member of a team of scientists and engineers working in UFO data, a project within CUFOS, and a consultant to the UAP expedition's effort to do instrumented studies along the Pacific coastline. These efforts seek to utilize technologies such as radar, multi-spectral cameras, and electromagnetic detectors to study the UAP solutions and situation. The website, which you should be aware of for the SCU, is explorescu.org. Rich Hoffman, it is a pleasure to welcome you to Meanwhile Here on Earth, my friend.
Well, it's great being with you, Peter. I mean, we've had a number of times where we've been on together. I've had you down basically on, I think twice in the Alabama group that I had going on. So,
yeah.
And of course, we've seen each other at the conferences and things like that, but it's just a pleasure of being with you. I really honor you and what you've been doing all your years, by the way.
Thank you, my friend. That means a lot to me. I will say, for starters, you are always one of the most sharply dressed people in the field. And you are, without question, the very first guest I've had of over 70 or 80, considering all the panel discussions we've had, who has appeared in a bow tie. And it is not a clip-on, folks. That's the real deal.
No, it's the real deal. I wouldn't be caught dead in one of those clip-ons. I'm sorry. No. I've got to do it the right way.
I think the last time I wore one was a clip-on when I was about 11 years old. And as I mentioned beforehand, someday before I die, perhaps you can help me learn the almost lost art of tying a bow tie.
Well, we could do that. We'll get online and try to do it, together, something like that.
Okay. And I can record that and we can post it, and everybody can wear bow ties in the future.
Sure. Why not? The more the merrier. And by the way, I want to share with you, I've got early pictures of myself that I've been digging up and stuff like that for this show. And by the way, I can't get over the fact that here I was, a young kid, and I was also wearing bow ties back then. So
let me ask you a first important question. Did your father wear bow ties?
No, not at all. There was actually we have a family member in the Hoffman family that did wear bow ties, but not my father and not any of my close uncles and things like that. It was just another person that we knew that had it. But bow ties have been a part of my life.
Well, I guess we've spent more time on bow ties than any UFO show has ever done in the history of broadcasting. So we can now safely move on.
Okay.
Rich, to start at the beginning, where were you born?
I was born in Jasper, Indiana. I don't know. It's a town about 40 miles north of Evansville. And it's probably about 100 miles south of Indianapolis, Indiana. But it's a very small town. It's a German-American community, basically. A lot of the early Germans, when they left from famines and things like that, made their way over to the United States to get away from famines. And that's what my family did. In the mid 1800s, they got away because of famines, and they settled in the basically Ohio, and the Midwest areas, and it just so happened came to Jasper, Indiana, and it's really funny. That little town has got it's got like a place called the Schnitzelbank restaurant. They have the German festival, of course. They go all out for that, but everywhere you go, you see German names and things like that. But that's what it's about. It's a very small little town in Indiana.
Do you still have relatives there?
Sure do. I've got on the scale of my dad was youngest of 14 kids, right?
Good Lord.
And so if you count the number of aunts and uncles that I have, it's huge, right? And in fact, let me share with you, Peter, the way we talk about ourselves, we introduce ourselves as being like, for example, I'm the first child born under my father, who's the 14th. So we do a matrix. I'm 14 by 1. And so we do that to be able to keep up with where we fall in that little spectrum of all the Hoffman family that lived in the town. But I've got a lot of family. They're in Indiana. I've got my father moved us when I was about 4 or 5 years old, and we moved to Dayton, Ohio. So I grew up in Dayton, Ohio the rest of my life. But there a lot of my aunts and my uncles also came from Jasper over to Dayton because they were trying to get jobs at NCR or National Cash Register.
Yeah.
And so they were all, I'm split between those two areas.
Our first image of the wonderful pictures that you've supplied us. Who are these folks?
Well, that's my grandfather Hoffman, and also his second wife, Anna Dorsum, and basically that's them and their house basically in Jasper, Indiana, and so the father of 14 kids, right? So anyway,
they were a part of your childhood.
Not the grandfather, but the grandmother was. She was still alive when I was born, and I had the pleasure of meeting her. Just a wonderful person.
Lovely. Photo number 2.
Well, that's the 13 of the 14 kids. One of them actually died before the photo was taken. But my dad is in the left-hand side of the bottom. His name is Robert Hoffman.
Okay.
But when you have a family that large, you're actually you're being raised by your siblings.
Yeah.
Actually, and you're living on a farm that's it's a 1,000-acre farm that they had to take care of. In fact, the name Hoffman, by the way, is basically a farmer or a farmer man in German.
I had no idea about that.
And then on my mom's side, she was married. There was a Schneider, and a Schneider is to schneid something, is to cut it. So they were a tailor, and so that's how a lot of the German names were set up. I had a chance to go to Germany, actually, over into the town where that was, and I thought, just as a piece of interest, I'd get the telephone directory and see if I could locate relatives. Well, half of the phone book was Hoffman. Come to find out, it's as common as Smith is in the United States. I'm going like, well, I guess I'll forget that, meeting a relative, but I did get to look around and see that part of the country in Bavaria.
How old were you when you visited?
When I visited Germany? That was much like later. That was probably, I want to say, like something on the scale of about maybe 10 years ago. Something like that, maybe longer than that, but anyway.
It's a very special feeling to return to where your people came from. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean it was really interesting to see where they did come from and to find out that area. I don't know if you've ever had the familiarity with the town of Bayreuth is the where they were from, and that's over near the Czech region on the eastern side of the country.
Okay.
And apparently that's where Wagner also does started his music, and then Franz Liszt was from there as well. So
your parents get married.
Yeah. Mom and dad get married, and then 1 year later I pop out.
Congratulations. Wow.
But
it's a beautiful period photograph, and there's such a great looking couple there. Wow.
They weren't certainly thinking about UFOs, but this, I will point out. Yeah. I will point out to you that in that next photo that you've got there, a lot of people talk about my curiosity and the fact that that's probably what led me into the UFO subject in the very beginning, anyway. But as you can see, I'm very dedicated in observing what's happening to that cake that my cousin Gretchen is about to eat, and I'm trying to plot to see if I can come up with a way to be able to get a piece of that cake pretty quick, I guess.
Very scientific attitude.
Yeah. And that's I was back then. I was actually doing the science back then.
You look extremely thoughtful and resolute in your quest. Yes. And that is far too much cake for one very small child. So you're doing a favor, no question about it. In growing up in such a large family, I'm always curious about at what point guests not learned to read, but mastered reading well enough to start to choose the subjects that were most interesting to them. And what kind of books did you read as a kid when you could go to the library on your own or draw from the family books at the house?
Well, I think that for the most part, I tend to look at science fiction. I like the classics, the Isaac Asimovs and and some of those other kinds of books, Ray Bradbury and that type thing. So when I could start to read, I was actually getting into those science fiction books, more so than like novels. But of course, you had to read novels and things like that for classes that you would have in college and high school courses and stuff like that. But if I were to go pick up a book, I would probably be picking up a science fiction book.
Did your taste run to the same subjects when you started watching movies? And did you start, with the family on TV at home or at the local movie theater? How did your movie viewing life begin, and what were the films that you were drawn to the most as a kid?
Well, I think for the most part, I tended to watch movies at home. Although I did, recall when I started really getting into the movies and the science fiction stuff, I spent a lot of time in theaters, and I would, in fact, many of the shows that I would be watching, I would probably go to the theater multiple times. I think I, just to let you know how serious I was, like 2001: A Space Odyssey, I think I saw it something like 13 times in the theater. So, wow. I mean, I literally was, when I saw a show that I liked, I would watch it repeatedly. But, but I tended towards the science fiction more so than anything else. Although, I grew up loving to watch things like Dr. Zhivago and some of those other really, really good, well done movies. Yeah. And I know that I was also hooked into all the James Bond movies,
They were such fun.
Yeah, they were fun, and so I enjoyed that.
I think I read my first James Bond novel in junior high school. And even then, I realized it was a send-up, that Ian Fleming was not writing, novels like the great writers of spy fiction. He was having a great deal of fun, and our James Bonds following the great Sean Connery have been more and more serious. I think Daniel Craig is a wonderful actor, and I've enjoyed his performances and his Bond interpretations, but they're extremely serious and morose and, very much not the character that saved the world repeatedly and got the girl and, drank heavily, but always was on the money and made it happen. With that large a family, I'm guessing your mother did not have a job outside the house. You guys were the job.
In my case, there were three of us. Okay. It was my father that had the 14 kids. But anyway, my mom did, was at home for the greatest part of our lives for the three of us. And then eventually she did go to work and started working at the local Kettering Hospital in Dayton and was making some money doing some housekeeping work. But for the most part, she cared for all of us and took care of us very, very well and encouraged us in what we were, growing up, I guess,
How did your dad earn his living?
My dad was working in fact, a lot of his family were working in the cafeteria aspects of the National Cash Register. NCR was probably one of the largest employers short of the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton. And they had a huge area that was all NCR buildings and stuff like that. And they had cafeterias and they had to feed everybody. So they would be working there and then they would work over it. There was a little park that was a recreational park called Old River in Dayton that they also would work at on weekends. And later on, I ended up being in the marching band that they had to be able to do concerts in the park on Sundays, for all the people that were there as well. So,
what was your instrument?
Well, I started off, it's really strange. I started off with a viola. And I think they probably throw that to every young kid or something like that, say, here, try it, and then like that didn't work out too well. And then I had an uncle that had an old cornet that he dropped off at my house, and he gave it to me. And this is the thing about me, Peter. It's like I must have had a great musical ear because ultimately, within a short period of time and without any training, I was playing along with Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass and playing the lead trumpets parts. And there were a couple other records that I got, and I was just playing along by ear. And I didn't even have the training to be able to know which valves, but I figured it out by myself. And so here I was playing all these incredible pieces and stuff like that. And then I had to go back when I got into the marching band. I had to go back and learn music. How do I read music? And so I've been like that pretty much most of my life, and I kept on with different instruments over the period of my life, to the point where I was playing French horn. I played with a mellophone. I played with an E-flat alto horn. I got into guitar and that type of thing as well.
My experience with the cornet was exactly the opposite. And I was encouraged to stop playing at the earliest possible point and develop my singing skills, which became my instrument of choice. We have a picture of you here looking very thoughtful and rather grown up, wearing a regular tie, but a very sporty pocket handkerchief there. And I know I mentioned in the introduction when your interest in UFOs began, but if you would, because this is such a seminal moment in your life and determined the direction it went in, as opposed not to set aside the extraordinary technical work that you have done for so many years for the Army, but can you recreate for us how you came into this work and learning about that first case and how it engaged you?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And by the way, just to give you a time frame for this was a 1968 when I was on we had a class, West Carrollton High School or junior high or something like that, a class that went to the Capitol for the inauguration.
Oh, cool.
And so we were there for an inauguration. And while I was there, from this hotel room, I took off and I walked, I think it was like something like 21 blocks, because I didn't know how far it was out and I didn't know the city well enough to actually go to see NICAP for the first time.
Oh my gosh.
So National Investigations Committee, and it was up on Connecticut Avenue or something like that. But I walked all the way to that. So, but I got started when I was 13 years old in 1964, 13-year-old kid that basically, I told you I was in the band, and we had to walk from the band building over across a big, huge field to be able to get to the actual school. And then you had to make it to your classroom. Mm-hmm. And I recall, packing up my instrument and stuff like that. And then eventually trying to get over there to the class. And it was an 8th grade science class that I was in, led by a teacher by the name of Jim Bayshore. And Jim had already passed around that assignment to everybody, which was to give a 10-minute speech on a topic that was on this list. And when I got there, the only thing that nobody put their name next to was the word UFOs.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
And so I put my name next to talking about it. And I remember going up to my teacher and saying, "Mr. Bayshore, can you please tell me what a UFO is?" And he said, "It's an unidentified flying object." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And he said, "Well, you ever heard of flying saucers?" I said, "Yeah, I watch science fiction shows, right? Yeah, I know what that is, but you want me to talk about that in this class?" So anyway, it was like you had a 2-week period to be able to do the assignment. And I think I looked up maybe like a couple books like My Trip to Venus or My Saturnian Lover,
sure,
or something like that. And, and I ended up, getting a wonderful D on the report because basically I just, bombed it severely. I didn't really do the study. And, and for the most part, it was, I wasn't really, I guess, that interested in it, or so I thought. Anyway, so to me, what happened was that I basically did my 10-minute report, and I talked about, trip to Venuses and stuff like that. And I said, well, anyway, and then he started hitting me with the questions like, well, what about these jet pursuits? I said, what are you talking about? They said, they're firing at him. Yeah. I said, what? Who's firing at him? And you get my point. I was like, I had no idea what he was talking about. So I didn't have any idea what I was talking about either, to be honest with you. But so I got the D. I went home that evening, and on the TV, they were talking about the Socorro, New Mexico, April 24th, 1964 case. And I watched Walter Cronkite get on and talk about it. And I said, after watching it, I was like, wow. I said, wait a minute. A police officer sees these beings that were outside of a craft, and it took off, and there was scorched, earth, if you will, or shrubs. And I'm, it hit me like, that's what he was talking about. That's incredible. That's real, I mean, and so I made it a point. A couple of days later, I have a wonderful aunt by the name of Anna Marie that basically said she was going to go to a bookstore, and she took me along with her. And my aunt took me in, and I said, I walked up to the counter, and I said, are there any books in here on UFOs? And they said, yeah, there's some. So they took me over, and the only book that I could find at the point there was the report on unidentified flying objects by Captain Edward Ruppelt.
Perfect.
And and he was the former head of Project Blue Book. And I started to pick it up, and there's all those jet pursuits and those shooting things in this book. And then I'm finding out that just up the road from me in Dayton, Ohio, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, is the home of Project Blue Book that's investigating this.
Oh, so my gosh.
To me, I was like, wow. I mean, this was incredible. I mean, and it just rocked my world from that point on. And I couldn't get enough of the subject. I was literally, get every newspaper clipping I could come up with. I clipped them out, saved them, everything I could, every book magazine I'd buy, I'd be able to go up and, use scout money instead to be able to go over and get it or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just started collecting everything I could, and I would be reading voraciously on the subject. I think I must have read Ruppelt's book at least 10 times. I mean, just
wow.
And then the next thing I know, I was probably about 15, or a little bit like 14 or 15, and I started going around and I started giving lectures to adults on the topic of UFOs. That's how much I had started to read this. And so I was suddenly in the limelight, but not until I ended up when I was 15 years old. Phil Donahue, who was in the town, heard that they had reported that I was around town doing lectures on UFOs. And so I ended up going on Phil Donahue. And the next thing I know is I'm now this young kid that's talking about UFOs in the city of Dayton. And I became the UFO guy, the go-to UFO guy. And then, that just led me into all different kinds of things. I was starting to get phone calls for more presentations, more lectures around town. I was going to churches. I was going to service clubs. I was going to, you name it, everybody and their brother. And then I was on TV and every radio show around I was talking about the subject. And, and then eventually I was doing case investigations around the city of Dayton. And I would be, coming in on the case, and there would be an Air Force Blue Book officer that's coming in to do the same report that I was going to do, or the same case. And then we started connecting in the Blue Book guy and me. And the next thing I know is I got the hotline to the radar.
Oh my gosh.
I got the hotline to the radar approach control out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where I could start, calling them if I had a sighting, and they would let me know if there was something in the area. And then eventually I made my connections with the Project Blue Book people out there, and Hector Quintanilla and all those people. And so I started to have that kind of connection. I kept hearing my name on radio and TV, and then eventually we got connected a little bit. But then, right after that, I think I told you I got into the Midwest UFO Network, yeah. And then I was hooked into from there. I mean, I'm just,
I have to tell you, Rich, it's kind of a habit with me. It may be with you as well. I'm always curious how people in the work became involved. And there's only so many ways it can happen. Right. You have a a sighting or an experience, you're just particularly open-minded and curious, you read a book, you watch something on television or on film, somebody that you know and respect shares something with you. But this is the very first time anybody at all, and certainly of your stature in the work, has credited 100% your initial interest and encouraged your involvement by one of your teachers at school, a science teacher. And I think that's wonderful. What was your teacher's name again?
It was James Bayshore or Jim Bayshore. And, I mean, I want to say that he was extremely open-minded. Obviously, you can pretty well tell that. And the fact that he had an interest in that subject was also evident.
Yes.
And I just, to this day, I applaud him for starting that interest in me. I mean, it's like, you think about like, are you ever impacted by a teacher that you had? And I'm sure that there are many teachers that are very impactful. But I think, if you take a look at my whole life has come about as a result of that one teacher, it's pretty profound.
Extraordinary.
And by the way, I did have a chance to go back to that classroom of his many, many years later after I was on television and radio and well known around the whole subject. And I said, Jim, can you let me come back and try to see if I can improve my grade?
I also love the fact that the reason, call it fate, kismet, circumstance, that you ended up with the subject was that no one else chose it.
Yeah.
Which, considering the sort of the geek factor of, wow, flying saucers, that sounds cool, I'll do it. And none of the other kids in your class did. And I'm wondering, to one degree or another, because I know for me, when I had my childhood sighting with zero interest in the subject, I did intuit that there was a ridicule factor, that this was something people made fun of you for, flying saucers and little green men. And I'm wondering if your classmates didn't choose that subject consciously or unconsciously, in part because, it had associations. And if you chose it, kids would poke fun at you.
I think looking back on it, I think a lot of us were so naive and unknowledgeable about the subject that we probably didn't even know what UFO stood for. And
well, you're a perfect example.
I mean, I really don't. I think that that's the case. It's really interesting because all of my classmates that I've got, I've gone through school with are, we're still talking and meeting with each other and Zooming and stuff. And it's really said, and they always point out the fact that, well, we were there when you started. We were there when you got into this. And sure enough, I mean, because I would be walking around, I had a briefcase with the words UFO written on it. And I would be walking through, my high school and everything with UFO. And they're all like, oh, there's that Rich Hoffman UFO guy again, I mean, that type thing. So
I love it.
But they're great people, though.
Let's go back to high school over here.
Yeah, that's the West Carrollton High School stadium, and I performed many times in the marching band. I think I told you I carried on with my music, and I was playing an E flat alto horn in that, and we were a great band. We won a lot of awards and stuff like that when I was doing that. And it was just a memorable time of my life to be able to be in bands.
So Richard Hoffman, MUFON investigator, Wednesday, January 28th at 7:45 in Bailey Auditorium.
Yeah. Somebody made a sign for me when I was doing it. I just stuck it in my room. But, awesome. That was just a room. I had a map where I've kept everything, all the sightings and stuff like that I had that I was aware of as I was studying them. And
Bermuda Triangle up there on the wall.
Yeah, you got it. The Bermuda Triangle up on the wall. And that was from a newspaper article, actually, that was in the Dayton Daily News about me.
And here, obviously, another, I mean, this is major. You are a happening person in the news.
Yeah, I was constantly in the Dayton Daily News, in the local papers and stuff like that, for all different kinds of things over my UFO career.
Yeah. And I love that, local group doesn't laugh at UFOs. Outstanding.
Yep.
And how emblematic of the time.
Yep. Very true. Yep. Then again, another article that was in there I shared with you. I had many roles, by the way. I not only was I being mentioned here about the UFO thing that I was doing, but at the same time, I was a preschool teacher. I did preschool teaching for 7 years, and I dearly loved it. It was, very rewarding. It certainly didn't pay a lot, but there weren't very many men that got
Yes.
into actually preschool age teaching types of things, and so I got many times I was being interviewed because I was a male teaching in preschools, or sometimes I would be teaching because I would be in it because of the UFO thing as well.
But you did not teach UFOs to preschoolers.
No, I didn't.
Those worlds stayed separate.
Yep. It was interesting, though, that I will point out that one of the students' parents was actually a producer at the local WHIO TV station in Dayton, and they had me on many times on many shows that were going on, and they would call me in. So he fully well, he was okay with me talking about the UFO subject with his kid. But anyway, I did teach. Actually, I taught science to preschoolers. And I loved every bit of that. That was so much fun.
I, for several wonderful years, was an art teacher actually for 5 years at a private school in Brooklyn, and worked with first through third graders exclusively for my first couple of years there, and enjoyed it tremendously. You feel like you've been run over by a whole bunch of happy little insects at the end of the day.
Yep.
And as an artist, I was always inspired by their work, which of course they didn't know, but they were so unconstricted and free thinking. If I give them a piece of clay, I would have clay telephones and hot dogs and typewriters. And in fact, I still have one of my little typewriters right here.
Oh, yeah. Very nice.
Thank you. I had nothing to do with it except inspire it. But moving along here we go. And I love, again, for folks who, were not alive in typewriter times.
Yep.
One took great pride in typing everything properly. And, if there was a correction, like I can see 1139 looks like a type over there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, it sure is. Yeah, that's, and we pretty much had to, by the time I got started with the investigations of cases, I was getting a lot of calls. Like there were I know you're aware of it, Peter, but that they call them flap years. There were certain years where we had peaks of sightings, right?
Sure.
And those are flap years. And so I know that like in the Dayton area, for example, you had 1965, 1967 was one. And then like, right around the 1973 time period, you had that, Charlie Hicks and Calvin Parker kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And then that kicked off a whole variety of sightings across the entire country.
Yeah.
In Dayton, Ohio, I was receiving hundreds of reports a week. It was just hard to keep up with. And one of the things that I started to do was actually in my garage, I started to teach and training investigators to be able to do their own cases. And so
terrific.
And so I basically set my garage as a little classroom, if you would, and had people come there, and we would meet, and I would talk about how to help out in cases, how to do, all the different forms you need to be able to complete, and help people understand angles and skies. How do you determine azimuth, and figure out the size of the object and that type thing.
Outstanding.
And we taught the astronomy aspects of, where do you look for stars, or where do you look for this and that might be in play. And, back then, and you've already pointed it out, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have anything like computers. So we didn't have even the recording devices that I was using, I had a reel-to-reel at one point that was a way for me to record something. It wasn't even until later that we got cassette tapes.
That was such a breakthrough. That changed our lives tremendously in terms of feeling more professional, not to mention, music, but for some doing interviews was something you could carry around. That
Sure.
was a real breakthrough.
And so, like, cases would, that you'd go on, and I've done thousands of cases that I investigated. I mean, I just literally was just bombarded with them. But I mean, going out and you're spending your time to go out into the fields, wherever the field was, or climb over fences to be able to get out there and to do all that firsthand level work. And as you very well know, there are a lot of people that are maybe smart about the subject, but they've never had the firsthand experience of talking with witnesses and doing an actual investigation.
Exactly. They work online. They correspond with people electronically.
Yeah.
They look at images, but you're absolutely right. And the people it brings you in contact with are a microcosm of everybody, in your area. It cuts across every kind of socioeconomic, race, religion, background in every possible manner, which is very enriching in a lot of ways.
Yes. My name was actually in every police station for calling. And literally, if they got a report, in fact, there's occasions where a cruiser would come to my house, pick me up, put me in the back seat, and then the lights are flashing, the sound's going off, and we're now heading out to investigate a case.
Too much, man. Too much. I love it.
Yeah, it was just that's what they did. I mean, they respected what I did in terms of the investigations, and we worked together with the police departments, trying to inform them and educate them on the subject and what they needed to look out for. And I told you that I had the ins with the base and was able to help out. And so, like in 1973. There was a patrolman, Bob Bales, who was actually all over the front page of the National Enquirer about his case. But there were like 22 officers that were seeing things, and they were calling me up, and they brought me out, and I was out looking at that case. There was some incredible stuff going on in that whole time period that kept me just always outside and in the field and investigating.
You while you're speaking, a number of questions are coming to me in thoughts. Number one, I think sometimes we need to be reminded that individuals have a tremendous impact on their environment. You don't have to be part of a group or a team. If you're inspired and you have a dedication and a tenacity, you can literally change the world around you, and not just among contemporaries, but in this case, knowing there's a central figure who cares that, he's not a grown-up, he's knowledgeable, he's worthy of our respect, and, even, ridicule on UFOs for folks in uniform, whether it's the military or police, has been endemic, although the whole ridicule factor has dissipated quite a lot the last couple of years, but that there's a central figure that they could rally around and that they could learn from. Now, a question for you is, you're still you're an adolescent, you're a teenager, and part of you probably felt, this is really cool, and I'm having a more interesting and exciting life in many respects than a lot of my contemporaries and friends, but obviously this isn't something I can do for a living as an alleged grown-up. What were your thoughts on what you should be aiming for to work at, when you were an adult? At that moment in your life?
That's a good question, and I'm glad you asked it. I think for me, it was a situation where I kept trying to think of how could I be the Lou Elizondo, if you would, of that time period.
Why not? Can I do this professionally?
Yeah, and I'm telling, I even told Lou that. I said, Lou, I wish I were you. That is very, very key in my life. I kept thinking, like, how can I get into this and actually do what I love, which is investigating UFOs? But, you have to understand that what happened to me was that they pulled the rug under me in 1969 when they ended Project Blue Book, right? And so when that happened, and then you have the National Academy of Sciences coming out and saying that they approved basically the paper, that kind of ended it, if you would, and it ended it for any kind of scientific look into the subject. I was like, it just it's like the knees were cut out from underneath you. I mean,
the adult world had written it off. You're on your own, kid.
And then you started to seeing all the wonderful weekly tabloids with, Hillary Clinton holding an alien baby and all the propaganda that led into that whole, laughter kind of thing that was going on. And, and so I just had to make a decision after that obviously there's not going to be a career in that, but I'd still want to keep in sciences and keep doing that. So I went to college and I figured I had to get a degree, and so I spent a lot of years just being able to focus on getting a paycheck. I mean, something other than preschool teaching, and working in restaurants, which is what I'd done for a long period of time. I got into the director of training position with Ponderosa Steakhouses there for a while. But I mean, I ended up going and basically then saying I got to focus on getting a degree, and that's pretty much what I did. But I also was focusing on building a family at the time too. So I ended up having three children myself, and so it was a little bit of a challenge to be able to pay the bills and to be able to keep up with that, and at the same time go to school.
So what did you major in?
So I started off in psychology, believe it or not. I was actually going for a psychology degree, and there's a part of the people. There's always a joke about the fact that people that go into psychology are actually trying to figure themselves out. So, and I think that there's a degree of truth to that. I had to figure myself out.
But it's actually a wonderful background to have in this work.
No, it is. And so I got into the psychology degree, and I studied, I had courses in even Freudian psychology. I switched from Ohio University over to Wright State University. I lost a lot of credits in the transfer. And that was, by the way, around the time the Kent State shootings that took place. And by the way, I was in the Ohio University marching band as well. But I also... then I was trying to take these psychology courses, and we ended up having the school was closed, and then money was tight, and I ended up going back and finishing up at Wright State University in Dayton. But I went from a Freudian kind of psychology to a B.F. Skinner model, and it was all behavioral sciences and stuff like that, which was a bit of a challenge for me to navigate and to deal with. So I thought, well, I needed to be able to, come up with some other thing. And I ended up going into organizational communications. And that's where I've got my degree in eventually. And then I went from there and just focused on my career.
So going back a little bit to your teenage years again, I'm curious to know, given the normal mindset that most Americans shared around this subject, that it was less than serious, what kind of support or lack of did you receive from your parents and your siblings in pursuing this unique direction as a young person?
Oh, complete support. There was no pushback. There was complete support. I had support from my family. I had support from, friends. Everybody was actually, to be honest with you, the way in my perspective, because I've been with this again throughout those different time periods with the UFO history, but I thought when I was talking to all those churches and all those different Sertomas clubs and Lions clubs and all those there was a tremendous interest in learning about this subject. They wanted and were eager to be able to hear about it, and I didn't see as much of that pushback and that belittling of me back then as I did during that period when we were in between the Condon report and up until the announcements took place about in 2017. So I guess what I'm trying to say to you is that I felt it was very easy for me to be able to talk about the subject. There was a lot of interest. That's why I was on radio, television all the time. They were wanting to learn more about it. And even that led into in 1978, when that picture you showed that me at 1978, we had the MUFON symposium in Dayton, Ohio. I brought it to Dayton.
Okay.
And Peter, let me tell you, there were over 3,000 people that came to that conference.
Oh my gosh.
That's unlike anything, that ever has happened since in this subject. But that's how much interest had been spun up in Dayton, Ohio, in the surrounding communities,
Of
with having
course.
Project Blue Book there and everything else. So I rented out the entire Dayton Convention Center. It was completely packed. We had Hynek there. I had Don Kehoe there. I had, Len Stringfield was
amazing.
His crash retrievals.
Yes.
I knew Len very, very well, by the way. I mean, I got to know him and I. In fact, the 1973 cases, his book is the Situation UFO.
Yes.
UFO Situation Red, the UFO siege.
One of the nicest people in the work, too. I met him later in his career in 87.
Yeah.
And I was, a bug on the wall at that time. And he was so effusive and so encouraging and so filled with enthusiasm for what he did. I will always remember him with great affection. That's extraordinary. I wasn't aware that event drew that kind of audience. Again, the fact that it was in Dayton, the magic, so to say, of being in that zone, and all of, the mythology that had grown up around Hangar 18 and, related subjects associated with that very well-known base. We actually are coming into the last few minutes before the break, believe it or not. So let's get through more of the photos that you sent me.
Well, that's just astronomy. Astronomy was also one of those big key factors in my life. And I do have a love and fondness for astronomy and understanding what's out there that people, and so part of what I did, in order for you to know the UFO, you had to know what the IFO was. And so, and you have to rule out the IFOs that are out there, right? And when you're an investigator, you focus on that. So you go out and you spend time, and then you have to deduce, well, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, so it must be this, right? And that's just the way that the mind works, and you go and do this kind of process. So I had to understand what was out there, and so going back to my 8th grade science class and the UFO subject, it triggered me to go into science more, and I had to learn psychology. I had to learn a whole bunch of other ologies, right? And really get to know it very, very well, at least, at surface level, but somewhat, to the point where I'm now like intrigued by quantum physics, and I'm always watching shows about that. And that's just the way I am. That's that curiosity, me looking at my cousin's cake, right?
And one tangent leads to the next. I need to know more about this to be better informed about that.
Yes.
Which is part of the wonderful organic lure of getting deeply involved in any subject. Like me, you are somebody who really enjoys food preparation as well as eating.
Yeah.
And that is awesome.
Yeah, I do love it. That's a seafood paella that it's out of Spain. It's like I use the Spanish authentic kinds of, like, in fact, I have a Spanish actually cooker that's in the back that you make it on, and that's a Spanish pan, and the spices were from Spain.
Don't even get me started. That is a work of art. And one more reason I can't wait for the pandemic to end so I can come and visit you.
Oh, come on. I'll make you one.
I'm there.
Obviously, part of being the food thing is you have to plant and make it,
Yes, exactly.
So I do like gardening as well.
And
yeah, well, a band camp, like high school, I love the music thing, and I told you I kept up with that. I actually performed in the Macy's Day Parade twice. In fact, in 1970, we opened up the entire parade, the group I was in. So
what an honor. That is one of the great parades in the world.
Yeah, it sure is. And it was, it was a wonderful experience that I'll always treasure. That's Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. That's where I went to school. I was in the marching band there I told you about. And that's the kind of that's the kind of dance steps. We were a funkiest band in the land, and it's called the 110 Marching Men of Ohio at the time. And we just were hamming it up and having a grand old time.
I was going to say, you can tell even by a still that you guys got the moves.
Yeah, we were playing a lot of Motown music and all kinds of great stuff.
The best. Okay.
Well, and I just want to point out to you that I also have a singing instrument. So I ended up getting in, and I've been doing singing In fact, I was up until the pandemic and stuff like that. I was singing the national anthem for a lot of the retirement ceremonies and various other things that were going on over at the Arsenal.
How wonderful. And a shot of you in the early 70s looking great.
Yeah, that's back at the time when I was again looking into the UFO subject. I have a couple people who have seen that photo before, and they want to tell me that I look like somebody, like some sort of major actor. And I said, well, I don't know who I look like, but but jokingly, I'll point out to you that I had a lot of people that told me I look like Dustin Hoffman, and
I could see that. And you've always had the hair. You have always had the hair going.
And I jokingly, I started, going off about that. In fact, my wife at the time actually got me dressed up as Tootsie. And I performed in a communication class at Wright State University. The next thing I know, I was constantly having to put on makeup and shaving, in order to be able to go for that. And I was doing all kinds of stuff. So, but I actually got to meet Dustin Hoffman then and Barry Levinson down in Cincinnati after they did Rain Man.
Oh, wonderful. And believe it or not, our first hour is up. This is Peter Robbins on Meanwhile Here on Earth with my special guest tonight, Rich Hoffman. We will be back in 3 minutes. Don't go away.
Hey members, the new KGRA-DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA-DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA-DB.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button, so just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
I don't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it.
Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk about how to plan for an emergency. Get tips and resources to make your family's emergency plan.
Discover the Observation Deck, a one-of-a-kind virtual event platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus. There's so many areas and activities to choose from. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, an expo hall, a nightclub, and even a beach. So come attend a conference, take a class, or hear a lecture on the incredible Observation Deck campus. Go to theobservationdk.com.
And welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth with Peter Robbins and Rich Hoffman. And let's pick up where we left off with this view of a certain facility, a major American military base that lives in legend as well as actuality.
Yeah, that's that's about the area where, I mean, this is the kind of like from when I was younger. This portion of the base wasn't really, it was there, but it was not as big, of course, at the time. But this is Wright Patterson Air Force Base, and it's looking at roughly the area, what they call Area B, where in that general area is where at the time it was the Foreign Technology Division. Now it's NASIC,
Yes.
which is the National Air Intelligence Space Center.
Yeah.
But you're out right there, those three things out in the distance. And also what you just had up there is the Air Force Museum.
Yes.
I used to work and volunteer at the Air Force Museum.
How cool.
And over in the buildings back behind this, there were these like hangars. In fact, if you look about, not in the middle, but actually towards the middle left, there are these two round domed like hangars.
Yes.
That's where you have that Avro disc that a lot of people talk about.
Yes.
That's where they had it stationed, and I served and helped out in that area, which I always get a kick at because it looked like a flying saucer, and of course I could always talk about flying saucers.
Yes, and we're going to get to a shot of it. And I remember the first time I saw a picture of the Avro disc in the later 70s and thought, that's what they're going to try to feed us, what we've been seeing if you do any research on it, it flew twice and it's just like a giant fan. I don't think so, but it was round and it did go up. I would recommend to anybody that's even remotely going to be in the Dayton area to plan on visiting this museum. It is awesome. Mind-blowing. In fact, before the show, I was looking for slides that I had taken there, but then I remembered that they needed still to be digitized. But it is the most extraordinary exhibit of aviation history that I can ever imagine seeing, and every exhibit, and there are hundreds of them. The craft are perfectly restored. You literally walk through the history of aviation from early Wright brothers through to cutting edge, what they can show us. And it's really quite unforgettable. So when you are in the Dayton area, do make a point of visiting the museum. Amazing.
I'll also point out that over on that Area B, this is interesting. I actually gave a lecture to the people over in Area B on UFOs. and
wow.
many of those people were Foreign Technology Division people, by the way. And so I got a kick out of it, and this is one of those things where, I did the presentation on the subject, and they were like, maybe it was a room full of people. I was like 35 to 40 people in the room. And I did something similar to what Stan Friedman would do when he did a speech. I'd always say, like, how many of you have witnessed a UFO? And then, you might get like one hand that goes up. And that's what happened here was one nervous hand went up. And I said, oh, really? Well, and I said, did you report it? No. And then what happened was I came up to the intermission, and one by one, people were coming up and telling me their intriguing stories. And then following my presentation, they were still pummeling me with their stories. And some of the stories that I had were like, things like my job was to go up and chase them. And I had a camera on the front end of my aircraft. And then when I landed, they took the film.
It's one thing to know that. It's another thing to hear it from the person that it happened to.
Yeah.
And let me ask you, it's kind of an obvious question in a way, but at this point in your life, have you ever had what you feel is a legitimate, truly anomalous UFO phenomena sighting?
Not of any object. Nope. What I've had, so my aha moment is not a result of a sighting of a UFO. My aha moment was being on one particular case that we had in Ohio, in which that there was apparently in this area, Carrollton, Ohio, there was a large number of sightings that were in the area. And that was on an evening. The next day, a farmer looks out on his wheat, in the middle of his wheat crop, and there's a perfect circular area where there's no wheat. The wheat is gone. It's not like this crop circle where it's still there. It's gone. There is no wheat. Okay. And then you go down
About what was the diameter, to jump in for a moment?
70 foot in diameter.
Jesus.
Okay, now picture this: 70 foot in diameter, no wheat, in the middle of the field. And then you go to the center of that, and it's a depressed area in the soil, like there's a depression there, and it's pushed down on. And when you dig down in the center, they're down to a depth of 2 feet. There's no roots of the wheat there anymore. And then as you progress out in any direction from that, you get at the same distance, and you might see on the outer perimeter that you would see a few stems sticking up above the ground, and that's all you'd see. And then you see a rotational pattern of the wheat, and then you have puffed wheat around that entire 70-foot diameter area of the stems. It's puffed. It's heated up, and it exploded and puffed. So now you're looking for any indications of how you could get something big, heavy equipment in, how you can do it. There's no tracks, no nothing. It's there. And so, there was a microwave kind of radiation that we found in the area. We were like testing the soil. The soil was not like the Kansas Delphos case where it was hydrophobic, but it was just baked, completely baked. And so I had that. And that's my aha moment, because when you stand in the middle of that and you look at it and you say, what could do this? And there's nothing that you could think of. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, it's obviously something from above that came down, right? So I don't have to see a UFO. And certainly by this time in my life, I was completely convinced that there was something legitimately going on, because you had a large number of ocean kind of like cases. I already knew a long time ago that there was a relationship with the ocean. Yeah. And I kept knowing that there was also a relationship with military bases. And so that's, there's nothing new there. I knew that back in the previous days. And then you knew that the objects would perform it the way that they did, from a standstill, instantaneous acceleration. You knew that there were no propulsion systems that were observable. You knew everything that they're talking about, the 5 observables now and all this other stuff. This is just bringing up what we already know, which was ultimately that those things have been doing that all along.
My mind is still stuck on the puffed wheat. Yeah. The fact that, in trace cases, which is a rich area of UFO, UAP research, I have never heard of one quite like this. And the fact that it's all together in this one situation, the soil, the roots, the lack of roots, no trails leading in, the obvious, people, not a true dedicated debunker, not a skeptic. We all have to be skeptics, and we know that. If we fall into the trap of, I want to believe, so I will believe because I know there's something out there, so I accept this on face value, as opposed to, like you said, what could cause this? And trying to visualize in my mind some poor, struggling debunker. And debunkers, Bud Hopkins, who, of course, was a dear friend and colleague and my mentor for many years, had a very dry sense of humor and occasionally used to refer to debunkers with fake awe of, aren't they amazing? They know this phenomena isn't real. And, here we are, poor struggling idiots that we are, just trying to figure out what could have caused this, but they know it's not real. So I can just see them imagining somebody sprinkling puffed wheat around the fake site. I laugh, but it's not funny.
No, I know.
Where was this case? Where did this situation occur?
In Carrollton, Ohio.
Wow.
And it was like, it was like around the 1970, maybe 73 time period. It was pretty close to that when all those peak sightings were going on. I know that Larry Moyers, the state director at the time, was there researching it as well. Larry and I got together on a number of occasions. In fact, he came down with me on a case in New Lebanon, Ohio, that was featured in that Len Stringfield book that I mentioned. And so anyway, there's a lot of weird stuff that was going on at that time. But that, again, it's just like after you see something like that and you investigate it, you say, well, there's just obviously something way to this, and I don't even need to see an object to know it at that point. But
exactly.
I would
That's
go
as
on
good as
Sky
any
Watch.
sighting in terms of an aha moment, as you say.
And I would go on Sky Watches, and and I'd never see one. And half the time people were saying, well, Rich, you're not looking down where you're going. You're always looking up. And I still haven't seen one, but I've seen one that I thought was it. And then I investigated the case, and turned out to be the Google Loon secret project balloon that they had launched from here in Huntsville. But anyway, that didn't work out either. So
wow,
still waiting.
Here's the famous disc looking.
Yeah.
It is what it is. But it is not, again, the fan in the center. None of the anomalous ones report having fans.
No, you notice right there, you can see all the propulsion and the lift, kind of all those things that you don't see on a Tic Tac, or you don't see on a typical object.
No,
the objects themselves
rivets are never reported.
Yeah, exactly. But that's a perfect example of what you people were seeing, except that there was none of it was completely solid. They would see no propulsion systems at all. And of course, I told you I was doing lectures. I had the UFO group in Alabama that I started when I came here, and you were part of that, and one of my guests on 2 occasions, which I appreciate. Yep.
Okay.
Well, then Rhonda comes into my life, and then, wow, what a partner I got for support there.
She is awesome. She is an extraordinary woman.
She's an amazing woman, and I am so proud and such a happy man, Yeah. But anyway, she's been extremely supportive. This is when we moved to the DC area. I got down, I met her in New Jersey. We ended up getting married, and then we moved to but we were together in DC, in the DC area. I lived in Alexandria, Virginia, and we were just having the time of our lives,
And did she have to go through an adjustment period knowing about your passion for this subject, or was it something she had an immediate shared curiosity in?
She knew that I had an interest in it, but not to the degree that I later introduced her to. So, she knew that I had tremendous number of boxes filled with something called UFOs. And when I moved in with her, we moved. I just never unpacked them there for a while until we got
good
settled.
move.
And then I, after a number of years later, I lay the boom on her, and then suddenly she's finding out that I'm like, wow, you really are into this stuff, aren't you?
I'm glad you fell in love with me before I showed you any of this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but she's been, a wonderful supporter. Tolerated me talking about this, and probably gets tired of me talking about the same thing that I always talk about. But.
Okay.
Well, after 20 years in the DC area, we moved down to Huntsville, Alabama. And
because you got the job working at Redstone.
Actually, what happened was the command that I was working with, Army Material Command, went through several relocations. It started off on a street called Eisenhower Avenue, and then it moved on to Fort Belvoir. Remember the Oakland bombing? The Oakland bombing took out the Murrow building that was, 10 stories tall.
Yeah.
Well, we were in a commercial building for this 4-star command on a commercial road like that. And anybody could drive up with fertilizer or whatever they want and do the same thing. So our commander got us moved over onto a military base, Fort Belvoir. And then from Fort Belvoir, after a few years, what they call the BRAC, its base relocation and closure, takes place, where they move bases and consolidate them. And so we ended up getting, the command got moved, and I just came with them. Down to Huntsville, Alabama.
Was it for you? Did you need a certain cultural adjustment, so to say, because Alabama is different than where you were, or did you just find, this is our new home and we're settling in and all good?
It was interesting. I mean, the Huntsville area, a lot of is like an island into itself. It has, if you think about what it's got here, first off, it's got the huge Army base. It's also got the Marshall Space Flight Center. So your NASA is here. This is where von Braun came and started the actual rocket program that made the Redstone rocket and various other things. And this is where NASA had start. And so you have, if you think about that, and now the commercial flight, the commercial space program, there's a good presence here in Huntsville, Alabama with that. You have ULA, United Launch Alliance, that does a lot of the work for, I think it's SpaceX or something. But so what I'm trying to tell you is it's kind of like a technology quarter, and it's got more PhDs per square inch than a lot of other places around. So I mean, it's an educational center where you've got the incredible people. So moving from the DC area, I mean, well, first off, let me clarify. There's a different response. My wife grew up around New Jersey and New York. Okay, then we moved to the DC area, right? Okay, well, there's the Kennedy Theater, and you still have a lot of theater, right? You still have that wonderful stuff. She grew up on Broadway, I mean, and so now we're in Huntsville, Alabama, and we have a Broadway league, and we've got plays, we've got an orchestra, we have symphony, we have ballet here, by the way, in this small town. But at the same time, it is a different culture. Yes. And it's a lot less, populated here than obviously, Washington, D.C. or New York City, right? So you can actually do things like get around and enjoy your life a little bit more. You don't have as much traffic, although it's getting a little bit worse. I don't know if you know it or not, but the FBI is now moving here. And so you have they're leaving Quantico and they're coming down here. So now we've got a huge campus there of that. We've got, Blue Origin, the Origin, that space program. They're building rockets here. We've also got a Toyota Mazda plant that came in. A whole bunch of other corporations of different kind of things are here. And you've got every one of the support companies like Boeing, and you've got Lockheed, and you've got Raytheon. They're all here.
Gosh.
And so it's a, very much a growing area, and it's wonderful. The weather's really nice down here, and so we're enjoying it and making a life of it in Rocket City, by the way.
Yes, exactly.
And so you got there's a Saturn V mock-up right there. You actually have a Saturn V in the building off to the left and the bottom. You've got you'll have a lot of rocket parks down here.
Sure.
From the Redstones to some of the other earlier phases of rockets and things like that.
I remember seeing similar, literally rocket parks when I last visited White Sands in New Mexico, which is almost surreal. It's like a Disneyland of rocketry, and the bright colors, and it caused sort of a cultural, psychological conflict for me. Especially against the beautiful blue skies, and thinking what these extraordinary machines are really all about, or can be all about at their darkest. Moving along here. Yep,
this is I've obviously I've grown accustomed to a lot of different people, and got to know a lot of different people over my decades of the UFO research. I think. Robert Powell's over to the right. Robert's part of the SCU and helped us.
And a good friend of mine, second to the right, Erling.
Yeah, Erling's. And by the way, I've been doing a lot of work with Erling because we have about an hour away from us, we have what they call the Cloverdale lights, which are very much like Hesteland. And
how wonderful.
In Norway. And so I have been doing some investigations over here, and we compared notes with Erling about what's going on in Hesteland, Norway.
Outstanding. Erling, for viewers, is one of the most respected and knowledgeable ufologists in all of Norway. And of course, I met him in southern Brazil. Where else would you meet a Norwegian ufologist? And also one of the nicest people in the work that I've ever met, and most knowledgeable. And here we are in 2016, the year before things started to really change in our field.
Yeah, I remember being there in Orlando with you. In fact, you introduced me for that presentation I tried to do. I don't know if you know what happened during that whole thing or not, but
Remind me.
Well, let me explain to what happened. For some reason, the computer throughout my whole presentation was auto-advancing slides.
Oh, no.
And so I would
Talk
be
fast.
talking, talking, and I was then having to go, and I was having to push the back button on the computer to have it keep going back. And I was trying to do this presentation the whole time that I was doing that. And then, of course, eventually, you had to come out and point out the fact that I was over time. But I was literally the whole time I was combating my computer, trying to quit doing the auto advancing. And so it was the most frustrating presentation I'd ever given. But I was actually
there. Technological nightmare.
It was. We were talking about the Aguadilla, Puerto Rico video at that time. But I know you probably didn't know any of that was going on. But
I wasn't aware of that.
I was going crazy.
Oh no, that's awful. That was a wonderful conference, and for me, it had a very nostalgic edge. My birthday occurred somewhere in there, and I really wasn't keen for people to know about it. I just wanted to do my job, and instead, I had 400 people sing "Happy Birthday" to me. With the cake come out. And on the last day, which was Sunday afternoon, I was going to be spending about a week with Kathleen Martin and her husband, Charlie, who lived a few hours from there. And Stan Friedman was going to be spending a few days. And so the three of us took off together at the end of the conference, and we stopped along the way. And Stan and Kathy took me out to a wonderful Mexican restaurant for my birthday dinner. One of the most special birthday dinners I can remember, but it was. My heart goes out to you on that. That is a lecturer's nightmare, and the machines win. You try to be professional, but it's all over before it starts.
Well, then I had a chance and an opportunity to be able to actually do the moderation for the panel. And you can see who I had there. I had everybody from Cheryl Costa to Ben Moss to Tony Angelo to Paula Harris. I had Kathleen Martin, you were just talking about, and Stan Friedman.
You bet.
And what an honor that was. That was just great to be with them.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, you're down here in Von Braun territory, where and basically you got a German name and you got a German background, so you actually have to look the part. So, right. I mean, I got my hosen, and I got my jacket, and I got my Bavarian hat, and I'm always at the Oktoberfest down here. So
it's wonderful. Great shot also.
Yeah, I keep bumping into people. This was Tim McMillan, who actually I bumped into down in Savannah, Georgia on a trip. And I try to, like you do, I like to connect with people when you're on travel and you see people.
Indeed. That's, the subject aside, I think everybody wants to live an interesting life, and ideally one where you're contributing to the society around you, leaving the world a little bit better than you found it in some respect or another. But for me, and I know for you too, Rich, one of the greatest perks to doing what we do is the people that we've gotten to meet, spend time with, and in many cases become good and true friends for the rest of our lives, not to mention some of the places that it's allowed us to travel that we might not have been to otherwise. And that's incredibly enriching.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's been very rewarding to be, and I've got friends that I've known for decades and, that are in this subject, and we're still good friends and we keep in touch. We see each other when we can.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward. And next year at this time, I'm going to be with Rhonda. We're going to be down in Australia, New Zealand. We're going on a cruise. I'll probably bump into some people over there, like, that I know of that are into the subject as well, that probably will hear that I'm in the town or something. But
I had gotten a quick note before the show from a mutual friend and colleague, Bill Chalker, one of the most respected ufologists in Australia. Yeah. Just how pleased he was that you were going to be on the show, because he watches it, but obviously there's a 16-hour time difference. But
sure.
it's one of the things about broadcasting. And
Yeah.
while we're live right now, immediately thereafter, it becomes a podcast, so people can watch it, at their leisure. And yeah.
Again, and some of those friends, this is when we held our first SCU conference in 2019. And we have a number of people there. But I want to give you the perspective of that's the Davidson Center here in Huntsville.
Boy.
Where the actual, up at the top above us is a complete Saturn V rocket from
Oh my God.
all the way up through to the command module.
Jeez.
And it's on its side, and you're able to walk down to this whole thing, and you're sitting underneath the Saturn V rocket, a legitimate real one, not a mock-up. It's a real one.
One can hope that it's very well wired, because they are massive. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And they have every Thursday they have, during the summers, they have a German Bavarian, kind of like, Oktoberfest kind of feel to it. So.
Wow. You won't go hungry there.
No, you won't. And again, I've been doing lectures around the city of Huntsville. I was with, there was a group that actually came over from Atlanta, Georgia, that wanted to come over to hear me talk. And they were going to go see also that rocket you just got through seeing, and so they wanted me to present. And so I did. And it was great. I met a whole bunch of people there that were very interested in the subject. And so I've been doing that even around the area here.
And
just to give you a perspective, that's my son there on the and his wife. He just got married. They actually they have a combined family, the Brady bunch, if you will, between them. So my son had 5 children, and I think Mary has 3, and you put that all together, and suddenly you have like 8. So I'm blessed with family. I'm very happy about the fact that I can visit them, and they with Zoom together, and we love each other. And I've got another son. Altogether, we have 14 grandkids. Between so we get to spend time with the grandkids, and pretty soon we'll be into the great grandkids. Probably.
Are they all over the country at this point, or in a few? Oh boy.
Well, I mean, we've also got family in Spain. So we have a daughter that's in Spain, and we have a granddaughter that's still there, and we have grandsons that actually grew up in Spain and moved here. And one of them is in Alabama here, down at a college in Birmingham. Another one is in Charlotte, North Carolina, and is working with Lowe's Corporation. But they're both in the IT world. And so we got Spain. We got Maryland, we've got, Colorado, we've got Dayton, Ohio.
And your mom.
My mom, obviously you saw the beginning picture, what she looked like. I mean, we've gone through a lot with her, poor thing. She's 91 years old, still alive. And
bless her heart.
She is living in Missouri with my sister, bless her, and her family. And we've just been, my journey has been to take care and give back to what she gave to me, and
yes,
and care for her in her older years.
Yeah.
And then that's just some of the Rhonda's family. We get together quite often. We got everything from her sisters to her daughters, and so we're always doing the family kind of thing. We're a very well connected family, and I love it dearly. I just how that's so important.
I'll say.
And they all tolerate me doing the UFO thing, and they love it. And there's actually many of my family that are right now watching you. So,
wonderful.
Anyway.
Well,
we like
this is not Alabama.
No, it's not. I wish it were. Boy, I tell you, that would be something else. But yeah, I was going to tell you, this is in southern. That's down by the Tennessee River. No, but one of the joys that Ron and I have are to travel. I told you we're traveling to Australia and New Zealand, but we've done the Amalfi Coast in Italy. We've done a good part of Italy. We did the 3 Rivieras, the Italian, the French, and the Spanish Rivieras, and we've just enjoyed travel, and we've been doing a lot of that.
That's the best. I think it's the greatest education we can have in the world.
It is.
At this point, Rich, what I'd like to do is shift gears
Okay.
and start to talk about the Scientific Coalition for UFO Studies. Was this your brainchild exclusively, or was it something you came up with a colleague or colleagues?
So let me explain that experience. There was a case that we became aware of in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico, of a leaked video that was from Homeland Security, and it was basically a situation where Morgan Bell, who is in Florida,
Yep,
who was the state director, by the way, and also instrumental in that you saw that in Orlando, that coming
Indeed.
together.
Yep.
But Morgan became aware through another friend of a video from a pilot in Miami. And they were trying to see if they could have this thing looked at scientifically. And they wanted to go to some organization that has maybe a scientific bent to it. So they actually kind of like went to us in MUFON. We were all MUFON members at the time. And the problem was that we also had to sign non-disclosure agreements, which with this military person saying that, and he actually did background checks on us, by the way.
Wow.
To find out whether or not we could actually do the study and be a part of the team. And there were 5 of us that got together. There was Carl Paulson, who is a physicist. You have Larry Cates, who is a mathematician. You have Robert Powell, who has worked in the semiconductor industry world for many, many years. And you had Morgan, who is in environmental sciences, and me. And we all got together and we started to take that video, which is 3 minutes and 54 seconds, and we took it and broke it into 7,027 frames, individual photographs, 7,000 photographs. And we looked at it down to the cellular level of each of those images.
Boy.
And if you look at the video, I don't know if you've ever seen it or not, but it's got what they call metadata on the outer perimeter, where it shows everything from the aircraft speed, its altitude, to it's got like a laser target in the middle, and that's kind of pointing toward the ground. And so it's giving you some sort of a distance indicator there. It's telling you that it's using infrared in terms of where it's setting. And the setting would be like, it could either be white hot or black hot, which means that ultimately it determines that you can have everything that's black in the image is the hottest in terms of contrast, thermal contrast, and everything down from that down to white with the shades of gray is being the less hot, if you would. And we had to take that video, which we got, and investigate it. And we had to find out basically everything we could about the aircraft. Was the aircraft a legitimate, aircraft, military, marine aircraft? And we were able to do that by FOIA requests, where we were able to get, everything from radar, where we could look at the radar and we could actually start to see that is pinging, and the ping of that, it was indicating that it was a military aircraft. The timing was right on it. It was April 25th, 2013. And we had got it, the film the same year. And so we had to then go and we did other FOIA requests to get radar data. We started to compile all that information together, and we started to identify what kind of camera, thermal camera it was. It was an L3 Westcam MX-15 camera, and we had to learn about the camera. Then we took and we looked at the pixels. We were able to look at the fact that its movement on the screen, you could measure its size was roughly 3 to 5 feet in diameter. We could get that because it went behind a telephone pole and it was blocked, so you could start to figure out the distance to that object. And you also had to look out and try to determine everything from what temperature when it's black, because the setting was black hot, meaning that black was the hottest. And what does that match? And if you look in the video, you'll see everything like the tops of the buildings And this was 9 o'clock at night, but it's in thermal and it looks like daylight on the actual video. You can see this on our website, which you announced earlier.
Yes.
But anyway, we started to break that apart. We started to look at it. We found out that it roughly at one point, it was 100 miles an hour when it hit the water. And it continued at about 85 miles per hour underwater.
Wow. That's something to consider right there.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
And then we looked at the black and compared that value, and we have this like software that allows us to do this comparison, by the way. And we were able to match, for example, in the video, there was one point where it was going through a field, and you actually see cows, and you could measure that color of the black, and we were able to scientifically determine it was about 104 degrees is what this roughly the temperature of a cow's hide is. And we were able to look at the asphalt and determine the temperature of the asphalt that was there that was also registering black. And we were able to come up with roughly the temperature at some points of this object that was as it was moving along, and it was constantly changing. It looked like it was tumbling, as it was moving, but it was. And trust me, when we did our analysis, we looked at this to figure out, could it be a Mylar balloon? Could it be a bird? Could it be any kind of like a drone? Could it be something else? And we tried to match that up, and we actually had the same MX-15 Westcam camera, and we were able to apply that on different objects to know that it didn't match from the thermal signature that it was giving. It didn't match any of those. So everybody wants to say, "Oh, it's a balloon. Oh no, it's this," and it's not. And then they also say, "Well, you didn't take into consideration parallax," meaning when you have something that's rotating around something like this, that it looks like it's moving quicker than it is, because if I move here, it's the background is, whatever. So at the point I'm trying to get at is that we took into consideration parallax, and we thought about that. We looked at the fact that it went behind a telephone pole, that went through, and we could measure that all out. And bottom line was an extremely anomalous case. We put the case together. It took us 2 years to do that.
Wow.
And we wrote a 177-page paper, which you can also read. It's a scientific paper. It breaks down the transit, the thermal. It breaks down everything. And put that together in our report. And by the way, MUFON didn't like it. And we were called onto the table because ultimately it's like, why didn't it go through MUFON? I hated to point out to them that they had the case in their actual database, and nobody was assigned to investigate it. But anyway, the point is that we did, and we couldn't tell them about it because we had signed the NDAs. And when we came out and had to go through and do our report, we weren't the favorites of MUFON at the time, at least, But we did have a conversation with all the leadership at that time, and they understood what I just got through telling you, what happened.
Yes.
And they seemed to be pretty much okay with it. They accepted it, and we went on. But it was after that the 2017 symposium took place. Yeah. And in the 2017, the MUFON was going on the secret spaceship programs and having all these other people that want to talk about blue people that they were seeing. And, and President Obama was seen on planet Venus or something like that. And all of the scientific community said, we're out of here. We're no longer a part of it. And so pretty much all of us scientific types of people decided to abandon our positions with MUFON. And we decided that we're going to go create our own organization.
Yep.
And we started the Scientific Coalition for Ufology. We've later changed the name to the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies.
Now, hold that thought for a moment, because I want people to take in for a moment, in this world where UFOs is now a mainstream subject, you can't turn in a direction in the media without encountering it, because it's much more ridicule-free. More and more people care less and less what other people think about what they think about it, and are public with that. People who would have never mentioned to their closest friends, co-workers, family 4 or 5 years ago that they have a serious interest in the subject are now very outspoken and public about it. You can Google, just for fun, UFO footage. Google it and see a zillion clips come in at you. Almost none of them have gone through even the most rudimentary form of investigation or analysis.
Right.
What Rich has just described is what it's all about in terms of establishing the reality and the seriousness of this phenomena from for the most technically minded people, and then, for the general population in an unquestioned manner. For me, this investigation, everything involved in it, is in macrocosm what the study should be all about. I'm very proud to be a member of the coalition, but my background, I have a BFA in painting and film history. I can't contribute technical information to an investigation, but I can certainly communicate about it to other people in a clear and concise way, do what I can to promote the work of this organization. And, there's a wonderful quotation I've used on this show a few times. It's from Max Planck, who was a Nobel Prize award winning physicist in the 1930s. And the quote is, science, I think if I'm off, it's by a word, science changes one funeral at a time. The old guard either need to die off or their attitudes need to be displaced in time for a clearer, sharper understanding. Nothing personal. This is just the business of advancing the work. And what I'd like to do, Rich, is put forward just to read some things that you have brought to my attention and that folks can read on the website for the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies. It is a think tank. Scientists, researchers, professionals. It's drawing from more and more organizations and industries. Some of what we've been able to include myself in a small way to be able to accomplish so far is already pretty stellar in terms of the contacts that you're making and the major groups, NGOs, as well as within government and industry that are already paying serious attention to the work that you're doing. The mission statement, which you should all be aware of, is to conduct, promote, and encourage rigorous scientific examination of unidentified aerospace phenomena, UAPs, commonly known as unidentified flying objects, UFOs, to fully utilize scientific principles, methodologies, and practices in the study of unidentified aerospace phenomena observed and reported around the globe. We seek to share credible data with the public, the media, the government, and scientific institutions so we can further our understanding of this enigmatic phenomena. In other words, in part, this is not being done in-house solely for the edification of those involved. This is about public dissemination. And emblematically, what you just described in terms of that one investigation, the tremendous amount of work and knowledge that went into it is a shining example of what this group is doing. The goals: to establish a foundation and resource for credible, objective, scientific, peer-reviewed content on the subject of UAP, to create partnership in scientific and technological endeavors to explore UAP, to establish partnerships with other scientific organizations, universities, and governments, plural, to help improve the data collection, data dissemination, and research of the UAP subject, to sponsor public and network environments and community to augment communication within the serious research community. This is, in essence, what this new and growing organization is all about. How many conferences have we had so far? Has it been 2 or 3?
Well, we were supposed to have 3. We had to cancel one because of COVID.
Right.
And then this year we had our second one, which was it was strictly live stream. And then next year, in the first week in June, we're going to be having both a hybrid. We'll have a live stream as well as the in person here in Huntsville.
Very exciting.
So we're looking forward to having it. We're already working on the presenters that we're going to have, and a lot of great things are going on right now, as you very well know. I was pleased to see, like you pointed out there, that SCU was listed in one of the amendments by the Gillibrand that put in, where it actually had SCU mentioned, and we were like thrilled that we were to be included. We're looking to still be able to be included in some capacity, and working with that. We've forged a relationship with the intelligence community that's not usually happened in the UFO community. They're usually standoffish about that.
Yeah.
But we've embraced them. In fact, they're a part of us. And we're finding that that's extremely helpful. We're able to now get to a lot of like the people up on the Hill who are taking notice of us
Yes.
as well. And so we're trying to grow. I look back on it, like Hynek and Vallée were trying to do that back in the day.
Yes.
Back when they were trying to get this thing brought up to the scientific community and have them embrace it. And I think part of the frustration that you had, of course, the invisible college that Jacques Vallée talked about, which
Yes.
is basically saying that there were closeted scientists out there because they didn't want to be. Now we're bringing them out in the open. They're no longer wanting to be invisible. They're wanting to come out, and we're growing like leaps. And in fact, you mentioned that we had 150 plus. We're now up at 170 and growing and continuing to grow. So we're
what you just said literally bookends my entry into this work. In 1978, the first opportunity I had to make any meaningful contribution beyond educating myself and making my initial contacts with other individuals was an opportunity to work on editing a paper by my first mentor, a former staff officer of the Hungarian Royal Army during World War II, Koman Vodkovetsky, a name that should be better known in the field now, but is not, who was in charge of all photo reconnaissance for the Hungarian Army during World War II. And he had struck up an acquaintanceship, a cordial one, with the then Secretary General of the United Nations, this before we knew anything about Kurt Waldheim's past in Nazi Germany. But Waldheim was interested enough that he had asked von Kovetsky to develop a paper on what I thought was a visionary and very serious theory of Koman's, namely that at the height of the Cold War a genuine UFO or number of them might come into American or Soviet airspace and be misidentified as a threat, as ICBMs, and cause a terrible catastrophe.
Sure.
And I got to sit up in the gallery for those sessions of the Special Political Committee of the General Assembly for this series of meetings that our friend Lee Spiegel, as a young guy, was behind inspiring then Prime Minister Eric Gary of the small Caribbean nation of Grenada to put on the UN schedule. And I got to hear Hynek and Vallée and Friedman all speak in the General Assembly on this subject passionately and with tremendous knowledge.
Yes.
And the faces on the delegates were, they wished they were somewhere else. This was not anything they wanted to hear. The resolution was passed and then allowed to die in committee. And here you are, all these years later, picking up the threads and moving forward and creating this network. The United Nations didn't do it. But once again, as I said at the beginning, individuals can change the world.
Sure.
And in your way, Rich, you have contributed massively to the development of the subject as a serious area of research. You've touched the lives of thousands of people. You've been involved in hundreds of investigations. And here you are in the next chapter in this grand adventure, which has informed so much of your life. Amazing.
Well, thank you, Peter, and thank you for basically acknowledging that. I think that I don't tend to like focus on my contribution much.
I know.
And I'm very humble about that. But I try to like at the same time say that I'm wanting to continue to push this thing forward scientifically. And you would ask me like that was it my inspiration to create it? No, it was actually the five of us that decided to create SCU, but myself and Robert Powell and Morgan were the ones that actually created the corporation and took it to the next level. And so I'm thrilled that it's grown. I'm thrilled that we're recognized for being a credible organization, we are trying to do our best to be able to make this as scientific as possible. We think that mainstream science needs to be no longer considering it fringe science.
Yes.
And oh, by the way, your point there about the fact that that these things could be misidentified as potential threats and create a war.
Yes.
I mean, that's why I still look at this, much like Lou does and everything else working in the DoD, is that we do have threats. We have threats from other countries. I'm working on a project where we're putting in drone killing devices at all of our military installations. And that's because the enemy potentially is putting drones over into our airspace and trying to spy on us, and we just don't know what those other countries are doing, and so you have to be mindful of that, and you have to evaluate it. And like I told you before, you have to know what the IFOs are to figure out if it's a UFO, and so ultimately you have to still treat it as a threat, even though people will jump up and say, well, they haven't hurt us, they're here, they're friendly, and then if you talk to a couple of abductions, or you go to a couple other countries like Colares, or something like that in Brazil, they don't consider them as being friendly at all. And
that's right.
So we need to understand what the phenomena is, and that means really, really digging into it. And I'm thrilled to be a part of like looking at that very seriously and from a potential threat, at the same time getting to know about it more.
Yeah. Well, I'm thrilled to be a part of what you and your three primary, your primary executive board members have built. I haven't had a chance to even go into the distinguished membership of your board members. And this is an organization that is a membership organization. If you feel this is something for you and you have qualifications that might allow you to take part in it, submit it. Also be aware that, again, I want to remind you, because I do want you all to visit the website, which is explorescu.org. And Rich, it's almost hard to believe, but we have come into the end of our time, and I'm hoping that you will be available next year to take part in panel discussions that we have. And I'm also very much hoping that you and I will get to see each other again next year in corporeal three-dimensional form, as opposed to on a screen.
That would be wonderful. I'd love that, by all means. Peter, I just want to thank you for taking the time. You talked about, well, I've only got a fine arts degree. I'm sorry. You're a wonderful person. You've got an interest in this subject. You've shared it with a lot of people. You're very well liked and appreciated. There's a great deal of respect that I have for you, and I just want to point that out. I do have that great respect for you, and thanks. I will continue to always have that. And I just want to say thank you for having us on, letting me get the voice to be able to talk about it. And hopefully we didn't bore your audience with my life, but anyway.
No, I think that adds to the richness of, we are human beings and we do have other lives outside of this, and it's important to know about them. This is Meanwhile Here on Earth on KGRA Digital Broadcasting, with tonight's last guest of the year, Rich Hoffman. If you've enjoyed this show, please tell your friends. And next week, when you return for the first show of the new year, our guest will be returning, Donald R. Schmidt, former co-director of the J. Allen Hynek Center for UFO Studies, where he served as director of special investigations for 10 years, a 7-time best-selling author, and a co-founder of the International UFO Museum and Research Center in Roswell, New Mexico. This just for starters. Please take good care of yourself, stand up for what you believe in, and be kind to each other, and have a happy, healthy new year. See you next week.